by fighter jets before crashing onto a nearby island. The impact causing a massive fire, killing the suspect. Miraculously, no one on the ground was hurt, but the incident raising major concerns about airport security.
Very unusual. It's not like we get this every day. He was able to take the aircraft and get it airborne, and we do know that he was in communication with air traffic control.
We have Fox team coverage. Ellison Barber is following the federal response from Washington, but we begin with Jeff Paul, who is reporting from Seattle. What's the latest on the ground there, Jeff?
Well, John, we know investigators right now are combing through the crash scene on a nearby island here in the Puget Sound. That's where the man who stole the plane ended up crashing that plane after flying it for more than an hour. Authorities telling us that they don't believe anyone was on that plane at the time of the crash, and they don't believe anyone on that remote island was hurt either when the plane went down. Now, we also know the FBI has around 30 to 40 people on the ground and that the NTSB is on its way. Authorities tell us they don't believe any security safeguards were breached during this event. They say the employee underwent a background check, had access to secured areas, and really wasn't out of the ordinary for him to be around planes.
Aviation in America, the doors to the airplanes are not keyed like a car. There's not an ignition key like there would be in a car. The setup in aviation in America is we secure the airfield, and then we have the mindset is we have employees that are credentialed and authorized to be there to operate, do their various job responsibilities.
Now that employee was a ground crew worker, which means that he was around planes a lot. He would help guide them just before takeoff or after they had landed, and they also would unload cargo. But again, what investigators are trying to figure out is how this man managed to not only take off, but fly as long as he did. John?
And what about the motive? Any word on that, Jeff?
Yeah, FBI and other airport authorities telling us that it is still very early on in this investigation, and they preached that caution to reporters at a news conference a few hours ago. But what we can tell you about this particular individual is that there are some recordings from the air traffic controller and this man who stole the plane. It gives us a little insight into his mindset. At one point, you can hear the air traffic controller who is extremely calm, trying to guide this man and try to help him land safely. Take a listen.
I got a lot of people that care about me, and it's going to disappoint them to hear that I did this. I would like to apologize to each and every one of them. Just a broken guy. Got a few screws loose, I guess. Never really knew it until now.
Now, our Fox affiliate here in Seattle says they have confirmed the identity of this man through their law enforcement sources, identifying him as Richard Russell. But the FBI right now not confirming any names. John?
It is good news, at least, that no one else was hurt in that crash. Jeff Paul in Seattle, thank you. So federal agencies reacting to the theft and the crash. The National Transportation Safety Board normally investigates all aircraft incidents. The NTSB says this time the FBI is leading the investigation, and the Safety Board will support their efforts. A former aviation official says there are plans for this type of circumstance.
I'm just kind of surprised that, we always knew something like this could happen. And when it does happen, we actually had a system in place where we had air traffic control immediately identify that this aircraft was not an authorized flight. They contact the military scrambles, air traffic controllers clear the airspace, and then we just monitor to see what this fellow is going to do. It is a terrifying scenario, but there's always going to be this level of risk with this kind of system.
For more on this, let's go to Washington and Ellison Barber. Ellison?
Hey, John, federal agencies are reacting to this, as are some lawmakers on Capitol Hill. The chairman of the Homeland Security Subcommittee on Transportation and Protective Security, Congressman John Katko, tells Fox News this incident highlights the compelling need to strengthen our insider threat detection and prevention measures at airports around the nation. As Chairman Katko says, he's made this issue a priority, adding, "We will continue to take oversight and legislative actions as needed to ensure that the American public public is kept safe from individuals seeking to exploit security vulnerabilities at our nation's airports. FBI agents are investigating this, as are other federal agencies like the FAA and NTSB. This is considered a criminal act, so that means the FBI is taking the lead here, and NTSB says that they will act as support.
First of all, what would happen in these situations is all the entities, so TSA, local law enforcement, et cetera, will do what they call a hot wash. They will review this incident. They will look at all the things that happened. They will look for the holes and why this employee had access to the aircraft, and they'll try to determine where the system possibly had broken down, and with that, they'll be able to strengthen the system.
Experts say preventing this sort of thing is not easy. This individual and most with jobs like his already undergo background checks. One former DHS official says there isn't a test that would prevent this, and he believes mental health needs a whole lot more attention.
We're trying to find a needle in a haystack. It's going to cost us millions of dollars, and we'll pass that on to the consumer to find somebody. I mean, I've always been of the opinion of there's an infinite way of ways that people can hurt us, but there's only a finite number of people to do that. So the more money we can shift into that mental health, the background checks, the better off we're going to be.
The Department of Defense was involved in the initial response. NORAD fighters intercepted the plane, and they were trying to divert it over the Pacific Ocean when it went down. John?
Ellison Barber in Washington, thank you. For more on this, let's bring in Ken Christensen. He's a former NASA and Air Force pilot, former NASA liaison to the Department of Homeland Security, and co-founder of artificial intelligence and robotics company Foresight AI. Ken, thanks very much for joining us tonight. You know, a lot of people are wondering how this can happen. Cars have very, very sophisticated keys these days, but you don't need a key to start this kind of an airplane, do you?
That's correct, John. And small airplanes have keys just like cars, but large airplanes don't. They're in a secure area, and if you're in operations or in aircraft maintenance, you can absolutely start that plane by yourself.
And if you have the security badge that gets you where you need to be, it's pretty easy to walk into the cockpit, and then from there, it's just all up to you, right?
That's absolutely right, John. And there's thousands of employees, airline employees, all over the United States, all over the world, that do the right thing every day, and this is a very small percentage, but you can see where just one rogue employee can really make a bad day for many people.
It's pretty clear that this guy took off not ever intending to land. There's a moment where the air traffic controllers are pointing out the runway at Joint Base Lewis McChord, big military airfield right there on the peninsula, and he kind of spurns them and says he wants to do his own thing. I want to play this for our viewers.
There is the runway just off your right side in about a mile. Do you see that? That's McChord Field.
Oh man, those guys will rough me up if I tried landing there.
We're just trying to find a place for you to land safely.
This is probably like jail time for life, huh? I mean, I would hope it is for a guy like me.
I mean, the tragedy here is he clearly had some skills. He at one point makes a joke about, if I land this plane, do you think Alaska Air will hire me as a pilot? He had some skills, and he could have used them to good effect. But, for whatever reason, mental illness or depression or something else, he decided to end his life this way.
Yeah, John, it's very, very tragic on what happened, but he clearly had skills. I watched the videos, the numerous videos, and it looked like he had coordinated flight all through all his maneuvers, both the roll and the flying low to the water and pulling up just in time. So I don't know if the end result he crashed intentionally or fuel starvation. I'm not sure how much fuel was on the aircraft, but I think the Air Force did a good job in corralling him. The two fighter planes, they did the right thing in keeping him away from a populated area. Yeah. So if the plane did have to crash, it crashed in an unpopulated area.
Does that show the system worked? I mean, they scrambled those F-15s out of Oregon who went supersonic. I talked to a buddy of mine who heard the sonic booms from those aircraft as they intercepted this thing. And yes, they did manage to keep him away from populated areas. But then again, if he had wanted to fly, into downtown Seattle, I suppose he could have, and they wouldn't have had much choice except to perhaps shoot him down.
I think that's a great point. And the fighter planes, they practice for this. This is why they fly and they intercept aircraft. This is what they do. This is why they train all the time. So the systems work. The fighter pilots work with the aircraft traffic controllers. The air traffic controller tried to assess the situation. Air traffic controller kept very calm, very professional. Yeah. And and that's what the fighter pilots did. Had that individual turned towards a populated area, there probably would have been other options at the Air Force's disposal that they could have done. I don't know if they had a cocktail of weapons on the aircraft or not, but they can do low passes and affect the aircraft flying in their vicinity.
Will this change anything? I mean, will we start to see boots maybe put on, locked up or idle aircraft while they're sitting on the ramp?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, John. I was thinking just that thing after this incident happened. You could put prop locks on them, like you see for smaller airplanes, or with jet engines, maybe you could put an obstruction in the jet engine. So this is like a two-man process. You need to clear the person that's going to fly before you remove this. So that would be an additional safety item, I guess, that would have to go in a checklist or in a procedure for airlines. And I think they're going to assess that to probably prevent this in the future, or maybe nothing at all, because this is so rare of an incident.
Yeah, the good news for those who fly is that professional pilots virtually would never think about doing something like this. Ken Christensen from Foresight AI. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Well, President Trump meeting with members of the group Bikers for Trump at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey today. The president slammed the media and the FBI, commenting on former White House aide Omarosa Manigault Newman, claiming he's a racist. With more, here's Rick Leventhal from Berkeley Heights, New Jersey, near the president's golf club. Rick?
And John, that was the one event open to the press today at the Trump National Golf Club in nearby Bedminster. That photo op with Bikers for Trump, which the White House described as a group of nearly 100,000 members nationwide, calling it a major grassroots organization that supports the administration's agenda. About 180 bikers were there today, including veterans and law enforcement. Very relaxed event, lots of handshakes and smiles and selfies. They moved inside the ballroom because of a persistent and often heavy rain today. At one point, the president called out the press, and then he was asked about former Apprentice star and former White House advisor Omarosa Manigault Newman, who's got a book coming out next week that's highly critical of the president. Here's that exchange.
Does everybody like the press? No. You think the media is fair? No. Tell the truth. I better not go any further. I better not go any further. Send him back out the way. Low life. She's a low life.
In a statement, the White House press secretary called Omarosa, quote, sad and disgruntled, and said the book is riddled with lies and false accusations, John.
The president, I know, was very active on Twitter today, lashing out at the former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. What's that all about?
Yeah, he had a lot of tweets this morning, but he did revisit the whole issue with Andrew McCabe, who, as you know, was involved in both the Mueller probe and the Clinton email investigation, and whose wife was running for the Virginia State Senate back in 2015. The president's tweets read, why isn't the FBI giving Andrew McCabe's text messages to Judicial Watch or appropriate governmental authorities? FBI said they won't give up even one. I may have to get involved. Do not destroy. What are they hiding? McCabe's wife took big campaign dollars from Hillary people. And the next tweet reads, will the FBI ever recover its once stellar reputation so badly damaged by Comey, McCabe, Peter S., and his lover, the lovely Lisa Page, and other top officials now dismissed or fired? So many of the great men and women of the FBI have been hurt by these clowns and losers. McCabe has denied the accusations of wrongdoing in the past, saying that the president was trying to destroy his reputation. John, no public event scheduled that we know of tomorrow, and then the president's vacation, his working vacation, will come to a close, we're told, on Monday.
Rick Leventhal with the president there in Bedminster, New Jersey. Thank you, Rick. And President Trump will be a topic of conversation tomorrow when the counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, appears on Fox News Sunday. Check your local listings for the time it's broadcast in your area. Well, soaring numbers of illegal immigrants showing up at the U.S. southern border, but not from Mexico or Central America. They're from a country nearly 9,000 miles away. We'll tell you about that. Plus, Charlottesville, Virginia marks 1 year since that deadly white nationalist rally, the city coming together to try to move forward. We are live in Charlottesville.
We can't turn back the clock and undo the tragedies that occurred last year, nor can we take away the pain, both physical and psychological. We can apologize, which I will get to, but we can't undo.
Charlottesville, Virginia on edge this weekend as that city marks 1 year since a white nationalist rally turned deadly. Last year's event leaving one person dead and dozens injured. Virginia's governor bracing for any possible protests, declaring a state of emergency and ramping up the city's police presence. President Trump, who was criticized for his response to the violence last year, today tweeting, "The riots in Charlottesville a year ago resulted in senseless death and division. We must come together as a nation. I condemn all types of racism and acts of violence. Peace to all Americans." Doug McElway is live in Charlottesville now. Any sign of trouble today, Doug?
John, almost none, and I think you can attribute that to the massive police presence which has blanketed Charlottesville with literally hundreds of local police officers and also state troopers. In fact, an indication of just how safe it was here today, there were only 3 arrests. We managed to catch one of those on our camera today. 64-year-old John Miska tried to get through police security checkpoints with some razor blades that he claims he had just purchased from a local drugstore. Not sure what he wanted those blades for, perhaps to shave his very long beard. One other arrest for trespassing and another arrest for public drunkenness. All of the calm here stemming from the governor's decision to declare a state of emergency much earlier in the week today, this week I should say, which enabled the expenditure of $2 million to supplement the police force here. The governor obviously paying heed to that independent review done by a former U.S. attorney which highlighted the many, many mistakes that law enforcement made here a year ago. The review found, for example, there was no unified command. There was insufficient space for the opposing groups to face one another. There was failure to heed intel from other law enforcement agencies that dangerous Antifa and white supremacist groups were planning on coming to Charlottesville, and a failure to ban or to confiscate dangerous weapons, including sticks, stones, rocks, Coke cans filled with cement, and a variety of other things as well. In a ceremony at the University of Virginia this morning, the president of the university said they need to acknowledge the mistakes that were made last year.
Let's be clear. This group of marchers represented an extreme group of lost souls who want to reject our values and aspirations, and they were emboldened, let's be honest yet again, by a political climate that fosters the idea that those fundamental values might actually be up for grabs.
Any idea what's going on in this country here? What work is on?
And you're looking at a live picture now from the campus of the University of Virginia, where a student group dedicated to social justice, UVA Students United, are holding a rally to take back the campus from the white supremacists, which they say took hold of the campus a year ago. Not much to really worry about tonight. There are no white supremacists in Charlottesville anymore. In fact, the two groups which are gathered there, including now Antifa and some Black Lives Matter groups, are apparently scuffling amongst themselves, or at least talking amongst themselves, in the absence of white supremacists to complain about. John, back to you.
Beautiful city, Charlottesville. Too bad it has that terrible stain. Doug McElway, thank you. There has been a dramatic rise in the number of people from one foreign nation illegally entering the U.S. across our southern border in the past 10 years. That country is India. Border Patrol says those attempting to sneak in get help from smugglers who charge them thousands of dollars for the help. William Lajeunesse explains.
when trying to communicate, we are going to have to get at the interpreter to get the entire story.
Most border agents speak fluent Spanish, but in El Centro, California, agents apprehend more Indian nationals than any group other than Mexicans.
It's a very common area for Indian nationals to be crossing. Why? Because it's a path of least resistance.
The number of Indians apprehended here has soared from about a dozen in 2013 to over 3,000 so far this year.
Across the entire U.S.-Mexican border, 2,000 miles, it is this spot where more Indian nationals cross than anywhere else. Why? Well, take a look at the fence from the Mexican side. We're only looking at maybe 5 feet. Don't even need a ladder. Officials say 5 to 10 Indian nationals cross here illegally into the U.S. every day.
This sector alone, 70 miles of border with Mexico, is the lead sector with Indian apprehensions. We have over 3,200 Indian nationals that have been apprehended right here in one particular spot.
How? Agents say the immigrants fly to Qatar, then Ecuador, then travel through Central America up to El Centro.
They might get instructions from the smugglers or the smuggling organization. So, okay, cross here, cross there.
In the process, smugglers get rich, charging up to $25,000, according to the Border Patrol. But attorney Judy Wood, who's handled many Indian asylum cases, says they have legitimate claims. Sikh men flee religious and political persecution, while women who marry outside their class or caste system fear assault.
People who are untouchables, the lowest caste, are basically not allowed to participate fully in society.
Many Indian immigrants end up at the local Sikh temple, where they get a meal and a bus ticket to stay with relatives while waiting for their day in court. In El Centro, California, William LaJeunesse, Fox News.
Is the confirmation of Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh looking more and more like a done deal? The latest on the congressional vetting process. Plus, embattled Congressman Chris Collins making a major announcement as he faces charges of insider trading. And many are wondering what was behind that mysterious 5-hour delay in the Paul Manafort trial. The latest on that and what it means for the larger Russia investigation.
In the almost year and a half that he's been at it, there's been no evidence brought forward or leaked out that there's been any collusion between the president or anyone on the campaign. And I think that that aspect of things should be put to rest.
A mysterious delay in the fraud trial of President Trump's ex-campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. The judge on Friday taking a recess for 5 hours without explanation, delaying testimony from special counsel Robert Mueller's final witnesses and pushing the trial into its third week. Jillian Turner has the latest on the Manafort trial and its impact on the Mueller investigation.
President Trump took to Twitter this morning to comment on the ongoing Mueller probe, first asking why the FBI isn't handing over Andrew McCabe's text messages to government authorities, and then asking whether the FBI will ever regain its, quote, stellar reputation. This is Andrew Miller, former aide to Roger Stone during President Trump's campaign, was held in contempt for defying a subpoena to testify in court earlier this month. Meanwhile, across the river in Alexandria, Virginia, the fraud trial of Paul Manafort rolled into its 9th day. Democrats tying the hearing back to President Trump himself.
As far as Gates, I mean, look, there's no honor among thieves, right? You don't know who to believe. You don't know if you can believe President Trump. You don't know if you can believe Rick Gates, Paul Manafort, Stone. You don't know that you can believe any of them. This is one of those things where we have to trust the jury system and see what comes out of it.
Manafort's trial got off to a late start yesterday by nearly 5 hours, and today it's still unclear as to why.
I don't know what the delay is about, but the Mueller team has taken some hits this week. There's no doubt about it. Their big star witness, Rick Gates, really got beaten up a little bit.
We do know the presiding judge received a motion from Mueller's team in which they complained about a comment Judge Ellis made Thursday suggesting that Mueller's lawyers should stop asking about loans Manafort had been denied. And no clarification from Judge Ellis as he resumed proceedings once it was done by calling for the government's next witness. As a result, the Mueller team wasn't able to rest their case yesterday as they planned to do. Next up in the trial, when it resumes Monday, 1 or 2 more government witnesses, and then on to closing arguments, which Judge Ellis has already strictly limited to 2 hours each. John?
Jillian Turner. Jillian, thank you. Be sure to catch President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, when he appears tomorrow on Media Buzz with Howard Kurtz. That is at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. A turnabout for New York Republican Congressman Chris Collins. He is now suspending his re-election campaign after he was charged with insider trading this week. Collins said in a statement that he will fight the, quote, meritless charges against him, and he looks forward to being cleared. Joining us now with more, Brian Yennis. Brian.
Hey, John. Well, look, just 3 days ago, Republican Congressman Chris Collins held a defiant press conference in his district just hours after he pled not guilty to charges of insider trading and lying to the FBI. He called the charges meritless and vowed to stay in the race and to work hard for his constituents. Well, this morning, he's still proclaiming his innocence, but he tweeted a letter explaining his decision to end his campaign for re-election. Quote, Democrats are laser focused on taking back the House, electing Nancy Pelosi Speaker, and then launching impeachment proceedings against President Trump. I have decided that it is in the best interest of the constituents of New York 27, the Republican Party, and President Trump's agenda for me to suspend my campaign for re-election to Congress. Now, his challenger, Democrat Nate McMurray, had about $81,000 for his campaign. He says tens of thousands of dollars more have come in since the indictment was announced. And in a statement, McMurray said Collins needs to do more. Quote, it is a continuing disgrace that both parties have not said with one clear voice, resign, Mr. Collins, and do it today. Well, let me do it for them. Mr. Collins, suspension is one thing, but it is time for you to resign. Do it today. McMurray making the case that Collins and Republicans are corrupt, John, and that they've betrayed the 27th district.
So do we have a replacement candidate yet?
Not yet. The Republican Party says that they ultimately have to choose, but some names that have popped up include this. Stefan Michaudjolou, he's the Erie County Comptroller, and Carl Palladino. Palladino is the CEO and founder of Ellicott Development, and he ran against Governor Andrew Cuomo in that race. He lost handedly. Now, the 27th district in New York includes Buffalo's suburbs. It's regarded as probably the most Republican district in the state. Trump won by more than 25 points, John, in 2016.
We will keep an eye on whatever race turns out to come of that.
You're right.
Ryan Yennis, thank you. Well, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley, says confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh are set for September 4th. Democrats are accusing Republicans of rushing the vetting process, relying on files from George W. Bush's lawyer instead of the National Archives. Republicans counter that Democrats are just playing politics. Let's bring in Amber Athey, media and breaking news editor for the Daily Caller. So it looks like Democratic opposition to Judge Kavanaugh is crumbling just a bit, Amber.
That's right. They're really out of options here, John. Of course, a lot of Republicans are saying that the reason they were requesting so many documents is that they were really just trying to stall the confirmation hearing until after midterms in the hopes that the Democrats would take the Senate and be able to block the nomination entirely. Republicans are not buying that. They actually want to see these documents, considering the people behind the request, particularly Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, have already expressed their intention to vote no on Kavanaugh. So they're going to go ahead with the confirmation hearings. They've pointed out that they've already requested close to 1 million pages of documents to come out. So Republicans are in good shape here. Democrats have really run out of options in terms of stopping this nomination.
Yeah, on a related note, California Senator Kamala Harris said she wanted more documents, and she got kind of an interesting response from Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. He wrote this. He said, "You've already said you're voting no without a hearing or even meeting with him. Your mind is made up, Senator Kamala Harris. You don't need any more documents." That's kind of an interesting counter to her argument.
Right. Well, I think he makes a good point. If you're already voting no and you're already getting a significant amount of documents, why do you really need more if you've already made up your mind? And the other interesting part of this is that there's kind of a split in the Democratic Party right now, because there are 3 Democrats in Trump-supporting states who are up for re-election, Senators Donnelly, Heitkamp, and Manchin, who's the majority of the voters in their state say that they want them to confirm Kavanaugh. So Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has kind of backed off of those Democrats and is going to allow them to basically vote whichever way they choose. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up voting in favor of Kavanaugh in the hopes of boosting their re-election chances. So on one hand, you have these hardline Democrats who are trying to stall the confirmation, and on the other hand, you have some who might actually vote in favor.
Yeah, here's what the Washington Post wrote regarding the Democratic strategy and the box that Chuck Schumer finds himself in. It says, some activists fighting Kavanaugh's nomination wonder whether the urgent mission they began a month ago has been reduced to a symbolic exercise, and they have lashed out at fellow Democrats, including Schumer, for not embracing their cause with more vigor. Schumer opposes Kavanaugh's nomination and has been critical of the GOP's handling of the nominee's extensive paper trail, but he has given his red state Democrats space to make up their minds rather than using hardball tactics. That's not necessarily a popular strategy among Democrats, is it?
It's not a popular strategy, but it's really the only strategy that they have. They don't control Congress, so they really don't have the option of blocking the confirmation really any other way. And it's important to note that those liberal activists would have opposed anyone that Trump nominated for the Supreme Court. It's not just Kavanaugh. You saw that when they sent out their statements opposing his confirmation, they kind of sounded like they had just filled in the name based on who Trump chose to nominate. And I spoke to people at a Supreme Court rally just about a month ago when Trump was making his decision, and they told me that they were going to oppose whoever Trump nominated, any single person that was on his list. So I think the fact that those people are basically more anti-Trump than they are anti-Kavanaugh means that their message isn't really resonating with the rest of mainstream America.
Yeah. As we close out this discussion, just a quick note that at this point in his term thus far, President Trump has appointed 51 federal judges. President Obama had appointed 42. So President Trump in the lead there. Amber Athey from the Daily Caller. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Well, the U.S. is ramping up pressure on Turkey, imposing new sanctions on the NATO ally. Why Turkey's leader blames President Trump for an economic war against his country. Plus, Iran test fires a ballistic missile for the first time in more than a year. U.S. officials say the Islamic Republic might be sending a message, but why now? And here's Jesse with a preview of tonight's Waters World.
A crazy left-wing professor debates me.